welcome to a new Quranic study. Today we're gonna read, inshallah, from Surah 9, verse 54. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. The contact prayer existed before Muhammad. What prevented the acceptance of their spending is that they disbelieved in God and His Messenger. And when they observed the contact prayer, Salat, they observed them lazily. And when they gave to charity, they did so grudgingly. The footnote says, this is another proof that the contact prayer Salat existed before the Quran and were handed down from Abraham, c. 2173. Also, it stamps those who challenge God's assertion that the Quran is complete and fully detailed when they ask, where can we find the details of the contact prayers in the Quran? See 6:19, 38, and 1:14. So in this verse is a clear proof, that the contact prayer was existed before Muhammad, and as it is mentioned also, in the appendices, that all religious practices of Islam were already established before the Quran's revelations. So another proof is the divine preservation of the Islamic practices given to Abraham is the universal acceptance of such practices. And there is no dispute concerning the number of rak'at in all 5 daily prayers. And the Quran's mathematical code confirms the number of rak'ah, so this proves the divine preservation of Salat. So, going back to the verse, God says, was talking about the hypocrites, the hypocrites who disbelieved in God and His messenger, but still they do Salat, they give charity, but they do it lazily, as God described them. So, if they are disbelievers, so why they do that? Why they need to do all these things, if they disbelieve in God and His messenger? And the response is, you know, is they do that just to show off, to appear to people that they are righteous, and they use it as a way to deceive people and maybe get benefits from the believers. It's all about material, actually, material of this world. Uh, it's political rather than religious reasons. So that's why God said, that they will not accept, their spending, you know, because no matter how much, salah they do or charity they give, all that will be nullified. Why? Because God knows their intentions, and because they use that, just to deceive and to show off. And we can see that clearly in another verse, uh, 4 142. God says, the hypocrites think that they are deceiving God, but He's the one who leads them on. When they get up for the contact prayer, they get up lazily. That is because they only show off in front of the people. Verse 55. Apparent worldly success. Do not be impressed by their money or their children. God causes these to be a source of retribution for them in this life, and when they die, their souls depart while they are disbelievers. It's uh, it's a reminder from God, to the believers that no matter how, you know, those disbelievers are, succeed, in this life, and no matter how much money they have or children they have, don't be impressed by that, because this cannot change, the fact that they are disbelievers. And we see that in Surah 3, 196, God says, "Do not be impressed by the apparent success of the disbelievers." You know, we should know, always, we should remember always that God is just, and He never treat the believers as He treat the disbelievers. In in another verse we see that when He says, "Shall we treat those who believe and lead a righteous life as we treat those who commit evil on earth? Shall we treat the righteous as we treat the wicked?" You know, so God is just. So because they decided to disbelieve, of course, as a consequence of this, they will get a retribution from God in this life, before going to hell. It's a God system. So, and that worldly success that can impress people are in fact just, source of retribution and a misery for them in this life. And God says in Quran that the disbelievers, never succeed in this life and in the hereafter, of course. So moving to verse 56. They swear by God that they belong with you, while they do not belong with you. They are divisive people. Um, so those hypocrites, who disbelieve in God, they swear to the believers that they belong with them, you know, and they do that because they deceive the believers. They make them believe that they are righteous, in for many reasons, to get maybe some benefits by being among them, for example, get charity or spoil of wars, many things maybe. But God says, they do not belong with you. This is the truth, They do not believe as the believers do. So when they hide their disbelief, and being with the believers, as a consequence, they spread their doubts, and they create confusion, they cause disputes and divisions, etc. So God says about them, in another verse, in Surah 4, 143, God says, they waver in between, neither belonging to this group nor that group. So, so actually, they do not seek God. They just seek supply, from the believers, and that's why they stay among them. In verse 55, if they could find a refuge or caves or a hidden place, they would go to it rushing. So, those hypocrites who disbelieve in God and His messenger, because they are afraid, are afraid to be exposed as disbelievers to the believers, and this way they can get, benefits from them, or maybe they don't have any place to go, maybe, and that's why they choose to stay with them and hide their true color. But God exposed their true belief, and the tensions. So If they really have a place to go, they would leave the believers and go to it rushing, And God mentioned here rushing. Why? Because, to be with the believers require to be ready anytime to fight in the cause of God, in war, for example, at that time. So the idea of being killed or terrify them actually, because they are so afraid of death, and that's because they don't really believe in God. That's it. Yeah. 58. Some of them criticize your distribution of the charities. If they are given therefrom, they become satisfied. But if they are not given therefrom, they become objectors. So in this verse, God gives a distribution system for charities in Quran. Um, and as we will see it, in details in next verses, inshallah. So um, as we learned from the Quran, the true believers obey God and His Messenger. As we see in 24:51, God says, the only utterance of the believers, whenever invited to God and His Messenger to judge in their affairs, is to say, we hear and we obey. These are the winners. So this is what are expected from the believers, the true believers. But on the other hand, the hypocrites are always, always doubtful, always arguing, criticizing, objecting, etc. So if they are given, they become satisfied, but if they are not given, they become objectors. So this is really a sign. This this is how they really are. Actually, they are materialistic, selfish, stingy, greedy, wicked in general. They are wicked people, and they care so much only about this worldly life while disbelieving the hereafter. 59. They should be satisfied with what God and His Messenger have given them. They should have said, God suffices us. God will provide for us from His bounties, and so will His Messenger. We are seeking only God. Um, if they really believe in God and His Messenger, this is what they should do, right? So they should seek only God and be satisfied with what God and His messenger have given them. So they should trust Him, and knowing that, that God is the only provider, and God's system is just when He give a command, it's good for the believers. They should have no doubts about it, and or any objection or anything. So, but because they are hypocrites, they are always doubtful, and God described them in another verse, 24:50. He says, is there a disease in their hearts? Are they doubtful? Are they afraid that God and His Messenger may treat them unfairly? In fact, it is they who are unjust. Okay, now verse 60. Distribution system for charities. Charities shall go to the poor, the needy, the workers who collect them, the new converts, the free to free the slaves, to those burdened by sudden expenses in the cause of God, and to the traveling alien. such as God's commandment. God is omniscient, most wise. Uh, in this verse, God revealed a distribution system for charities. So he gave the category of people whom the charities should go to them. So the first category is the poor, and as we know, you know, the meaning of poor is lacking sufficient money to live at a standard considered comfortable or normal in a society. Okay, this is the definition of poor. For the needy is lacking the necessities of life, very poor. Okay, and the third category is to free slaves, and we know that it's not existing anymore now, thank God, but it was mentioned at that time. The fourth category is to those burdened by sudden expenses. So it's poor people who are in sudden, crisis. Um, Other category is in the cause of God. So, for example, using the money to spread the message or preparation, for a war or anything like that, for in the cause of God. And the last category is the traveling alien. So this is the distribution system for charities, and it's a commandment from God. Verse 61. Some of them heard the prophet by saying, "He's all ears." Say, "It is better for you that he listens to you." He believes in God and trusts the believers. He is a mercy for those among you who believe. Those who hurt God's messenger have incurred a painful retribution. Um, he's all ears. So, in general, he's all ears means that he's eager, to hear something, eager to listen attentively, you know. And the prophet was like that, he was eager to listen attentively to people, listen to their, questions, stories, and so God mentioned that is a good quality actually, to have a prophet with that quality among the believers, and that he listened to them, it's a mercy from God. So, but God exposed the hypocrite, who were mocking and hurting the prophet by saying behind his back, that he's all ears. And that shows that, how hypocrite they are. And that shows also that the prophet, you know, used to listen more than, he speak. And it's actually a good thing. Like, Rashad Khalif, I think he mentioned that God gives us two ears, and one mouth, to listen more than speak, I think. And there is a verse in Bible too, James 1:19. It says, uh, everyone should be quiet to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Okay. Okay. So another point here uh, is that is that the prophet. It proved that the prophet was not a talkative person, you know, and this is And there is a question here is just if he was not a talkative person, so where those millions of hadiths came from? Okay, if he was not, he was just all ears, just listening, more than speaking. So this is, I think, a proof again, um, that the hadith are lies attributed to the prophets against his will after he died, and he was commanded to deliver the Quran and follow the Quran, nothing but the Quran. And as also he was forbidden, from explaining the Quran, when God says, do not move your tongue to hasten. So, so God says about all who heard the messenger, God's messenger, by mocking him or attributing lies to him, for example, hadith and stuff, etc., they have incurred a painful retribution. Now, verse 62, they swear by God to you, to please you, when God and his messenger are more worthy of pleasing if they are really believers. Um, as we see from this verse, that the hypocrite continue to deceive, the believers and lie to them to convince them that they are, with them by swearing to God, using God's name, to look righteous, pious, and they do that, because they are actually afraid to get exposed to them. That's why, they try hard to please them, instead of pleasing God. And yeah, okay. 63. Retribution for opposing God and his messenger. Did they not know that anyone who opposes God and his messenger has incurred the fire of hell forever? This is the worst humiliation. So continue on, talking about those hypocrites. Uh, um, they are actually, always afraid, fearing to get exposed, you know, and fearing that they can be, humiliated by the believers, once they got exposed to them. I think they are very afraid of that. That's why they do their best to look righteous, to look, swear by God to them, pleasing them, for that purpose. But they can't deceive God because God knows exactly, their true belief and their opposition to God and His messenger. So they should be afraid of Him instead, and His retribution instead of being afraid of humans' humiliation, for example, So incurring the fire of hell forever is the worst humiliation as God described it, if they only know, because they don't know, they don't believe in God. That's why they don't really, uh, uh, they are not aware of it. 64. The hypocrites. The hypocrites worry that a surah may be revealed, exposing what is inside their hearts. Say, go ahead and mock. God will expose exactly what you are afraid of. So those hypocrites, they actually don't care about God, and they don't care that He knows about what inside their hearts and what they are doing and mocking and all these evil deeds that they've been doing. They don't care. They worry, you know, just about, being exposed to the people. This is what they are more worried about. And God described them, in another verse in 59:13. He said, "Indeed, you strike more terror in their hearts than their fear of God." You know, so God says, "Go ahead and mock. God will expose actually what you are afraid of. Exactly, sorry, what you are afraid of." So it's God's system, that He doesn't allow those hypocrites, to deceive the believers for a long time, period of time. He exposed them, sooner or later, because this is how God's system, He says in Surah 29, I think, I believe, I don't remember. Okay. Uh, God says, God will most certainly distinguish those who believe, and He will most certainly expose the hypocrites. So it's a God's promise that He always exposed the hypocrites. 16:5. If you ask them, they would say, "We were only mocking and kidding." Say, "Do you realize that you are mocking God and His revelations and His messenger?" Um, so this verse, shows that after they were exposed by God, they were asked about, the things that they've done, like mocking God, mocking His revelations, mocking His messenger, and other things. And so after being exposed, they, automatically deny it, and they, by saying, "We were only mocking and kidding." It's like something really, simple. It's like they give it as very, silly justification. I see, by saying that, because it's not acceptable, and it's not an acceptable excuse to give, for God or for the believers. Because mocking God and His revelations and His messenger is a gross sin. If they were really believers, they would never do that. Okay, now 66. Do not apologize. You have disbelieved after having believed. If we pardon some of you, we will punish others among you as a consequence of their wickedness. Okay, so after being exposed by God, you know, any excuse that they can came up with, or apologies, it will not be acceptable by God, because God says, "You have disbelieved after having believed." So no matter how many times, they swear to God that they are believers, you know, or, it's just a lip service, for God, because their behavior, proved, the contrary, prove that they've been doing, wicked, uh, wicked behavior, and proves that they are actually disbelievers, by mocking God, His messenger, and hurting the messenger, you know, objecting God's commandment, etc. So a true believer will never do that or hurt the messenger, never. And we see that in Surah 7, 157. God says, "Those who believe in Him respect him, support him, and follow the light that came with him are the are the successful ones. 67. The hypocrite's man and the hypocrite woman belong with each other. They advocate evil and prohibit righteousness, and they are stingy. They forgot God, so he forgot them. The hypocrites are truly wicked. Um, so in this verse, God gives more treats of the hypocrites, like they advocate evil and prohibit righteousness. They are so stingy with their money, and God gives many, treats of the hypocrites in Quran, so that can help the believers, to recognize them. And God described them as a truly wicked. So in general, the hypocrites are wicked and evil disbelievers, but disguised as a believers, in front of people. And God promised them the fire of hell, as we see in the next verse 68. God says, God promises the hypocrite man and the hypocrite woman, as well as the disbelievers, the fire of hell, wherein they abide forever. It suffices them. God has condemned them. They have incurred an everlasting retribution. So this is what is waiting, all the hypocrites and the disbelievers together, as a consequence of what they did, Um, the fire of hell, it will be their abode forever, Imagine how terrible, to be, in, this uh, situation forever, plus, God has condemned them, and they will get an everlasting retribution in this world, and in the hereafter will be the worst humiliation. Um, and in another verse, God says that the hypocrite will be committed to the lowest pit of hell, and that shows that the hypocrites are worse than the disbelievers. Actually, they are all together, but the hypocrites are more worse, as God mentioned, that they will be in the lowest pit of hell. Because at least the disbelievers are clear. They announce their disbelief, without any need to hide it or to deceive people, but about the hypocrites, they sit with the believers, imagine, and they deceive them and appear righteous, and you know uh, and in the same time, they use that to spread their doubts, their poison thoughts, they are more close to the message, actually, and that's why they will get, the worst retribution. With that, I will stop here, inshallah, and if there's any comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, mashallah.
Thank
MashaAllah.
you.
I wanted to make a comment here. So it's a lot of verses about hypocrites and how they behave, and even from the time of prophet, they were already there. Imagine, and this is not just the prophet, but the messenger of the covenant as well. Has experienced. I mean, they can have. They had a chance. These kind of people, and I'm just talking about in the time of messenger and the prophet. Imagine they have the chance to be the elite of the elite. The first to believe, and but there's, like God says in the Quran, they have disease in their heart. Like these people can can't even help it. It's like they're overtaken by this disease that they show themselves as believers, but their heart never believe. And apparently they look like, oh, they have believed, and they sit among the believers or submitters, and they're among them. But they, like the sister was saying, they cause doubt and they create problems. Why? Sometimes I think why they're destined for the pit of hell is that they can mislead other people with their doubts, and multitudes of people could go astray because of them. While a disbeliever, straightforward, who says, I am who I am, and they don't confuse you with anything. Their status is very open. So these are the worst people. They're hidden. Their agenda is different, and they constantly work against. It's like spies, having spies within an organization. Eventually, they can do a lot of damage without you know anybody noticing them. So the damage they do is severe, and we have an example of one of this Turkish person, Deep, who used to be, in the beginning, he was among the submitters at the time of Messenger of the Covenant, and he started to create doubts and started to challenge things from a messenger of God, and God exposed him during even his life. But then he continued to deviate, became the cause of, or obviously, who is supposed to go off the path will go off the path. But these kind of people will be responsible for their sins as well, because they will go deeper into the pit of hell, because they uh, confuse and mislead multitudes of people. So that's really important to be very careful. Once God exposes them, and God says He does expose them, it's not like you'll never know who the hypocrites are. God does expose them. And once they're exposed, you really need to run for your life after that and stay away from them. Okay, that's all for now.
MashaAllah, like the the statement you said about so verse number 61, that that Messenger of the Covenant says that God has given us 2 ears and one mouth. So if we listen more than we talk, because if you talk more, a lot of time we will be just saying nonsense. Listening more is very important, and so as we learn like you said, the prophet was not talking too much, and all these people are coming, and they don't like the message, and they're causing disturbance. They're saying all those things, and here the prophet, the messenger of God, is sitting among the believers and not saying anything, or even saying something that is more appropriate. He's not losing his temper. He's behaving in a good manner, as we see a clear example from the messenger of the covenant, that whenever he spoke, he doesn't lose his temper. He spoke in a straight, stern voice. He tells the people exactly what it is. Like we learned from the great debate, the guy is causing a lot of, saying a lot of bad things, that you are like us and this and that. But he's telling him exactly what it is in a straight voice. The guy one time came to the Tucson Masjid. He was from among the regular Muslims, and there was a Quran study, and he's saying a lot of things about that you don't believe in Muhammad, this and that, and you can listen to that audio. And Messenger of the Covenant is speaking telling him exactly what it is. He's not, you know, caking it or whatever, you know, the statement that he's not trying to make it fancy or something. He's telling exactly what the Quran
Sugarcoating.
says. Sugar coating, exactly. Yeah, and they using Quran verses to explain to this guy who's debating that Muhammad is this and that. And the other one is when he was talking to Susan in the one of these final debates, Quran studies or the video talk. He's telling exactly what it is. So we learn a lot from him, that how to communicate and not to lose our temper. And same probably thing that happened with Prophet Muhammad, that he's listening to them wisely and trying to process the information. And they start mocking just because he's listening. They're mocking on that too. Like, you know, when some idiot people, when they talk and they talk and talk, the other person is just quiet and listening, and then they have these people, they're talking, they have nothing better to say, then they start attacking this person. Oh, he doesn't even talk, he doesn't, I mean, they have nothing better to say, and they will start insulting even the fact that he's listening to them. And they're calling him, he's all ears. God is calling him, he's a mercy. So the creator of the heaven and earth is calling him a mercy. These disbelievers, hypocrites, are calling him all ears. What a difference that is. And some of the traditional Muslims have taken a lot of these verses, like he's a mercy, they call him a mercy. They start that we praise him, he's a mercy, so we'll get mercy through him. Completely taking it out of the context where his mercy is, because God has gave him the message, and that's what becomes a mercy, that we listen to the message and follow it. Mashallah, praise God.
Yeah, mashallah, to add to that, that there is another verse in the Quran where God says, do not engage Prophet in lengthy conversations. First of all, I mean, I can imagine his time must be very precious. And of course, careful listening of each and every question. If just imagine if he just would talk and not listen at all, then it is so important for a messenger to listen what other people are saying very carefully, so he can speak in the light of Quran, not just suddenly answer something from himself. And as Sister Huda mentioned, that another proof that hadith was not issued from him. I mean, just imagine he's talking and answering people's questions all the time, according to them. They will come and ask this and that, this and that. Everything is in the Quran, and basically the answer would be from the Quran. And God did not want people to waste. If he would start a lengthy conversation, there would be no end. They will sit there all night, all day. So he must be very careful, like what to answer, what not. And because the Quran has the answers, and he must be just giving them verses, and then not even explain. Like a messenger was not to even explain too much of the Quran. Basically, the clarifying messenger has done that role, and it's a specific role that messenger's whole mission was. Prophet Muhammad's message, the whole mission was to deliver the Quran as it is, and not waste too much time everywhere um, explaining it. Right? It was straightforward. God says it's a simple to understand book, and people would get everything, all the answers in it. Imagine you don't need a teacher or anything, but then God sends us a clarifying teacher for the Quran after so many years, after 1400 years. Sure.
Yeah, mashallah. Also, the next verse, verse number 62, they swear by God to please you when God and his messenger are more worthy of pleasing. I mean, if you separate this part through comma, the first part is they swear by God to please you. You meaning a person, prophet. Then God and his messenger are more worthy of pleasing. Uh, God and his messenger are more worthy of pleasing. So there's a distinct difference between the messenger, the prophet as a man, or messenger carrying, holding the book. When he's holding the book, when he's preaching, he's a messenger. He's acting. He's like a speaker. When you like the radio station when they broadcast, and you have a radio, and the radio speaker is the voice is coming out, so the radio is not going to say anything. Whatever they broadcast is going to come out. So he is basically a speaker of God, speaking what exactly. So here we see a very clear difference between a person and he's not worth. I mean, they're trying to please him to probably gain worldly benefits or something. They completely miss the point that what he's preaching, the message, a message of God, that is supposed to be worthy of pleasing, not the man as a messenger or prophet. Mashallah.
Yeah, there is like Adam just explained before about that he is a mercy. So people took so much from this verse and similar to other verses like that. So they think that okay, Prophet Nabi is the mercy, so they worship him instead of understanding that not him, the man, but the message he brought with that he is a mercy. The message is a mercy because he is a deliverer of that message. And that is so important to understand. But of course, you understand when you read the Quran very thoroughly and carefully, and when you sincerely want to understand it, then God will teach and God will explain that what is the difference between these two things.
Yeah, mashallah. How many times when people say uh, things about, for example, something you own, like a car, I mean, for example, Solomon bought a new car and somebody will say, well, that's a nice car. And his response will be like, oh, this is the mercy of God. I mean, I didn't do anything. So the car doesn't become a mercy in itself that you start worshiping it. Similarly, when you have kids, we always say like in Urdu, "Ya Allah ki rahmat hai," this is a mercy of God. These kids are mercy of God. The kids are not in itself is a mercy. It was a mercy out of God that He gave me these kids, and it's a very understandable thing, but they twist it into making Him as a mercy, so that you start praising Him and worshiping Him, which becomes an idol worship. Mashallah. Somebody was asking a question about the verse number 60 and the other place where the charities has the system of charity, and it's the word is used the same way. The both are used charity. The other one doesn't say the obligatory charity where the money should go to the parents, then relatives, and that sequence. And here is the poor, needy. So he was asking, what's the difference? How do we know which is zakat? I know we have talked about it, but I also kind of forgot about it. If somebody can explain.
I think zakat is mentioned obligatory charity. It's another verse. So that's why it's explained to give to from your parents. It started from there. So, and the charity, this charity is like the common charity, whatever person can afford. So they give to charity. So that this charity, which is common charity, that will go to this way. So I think this is how I understand. I think so that this is the difference between the obligatory charity and this whatever you can afford and whenever you want to give, so you can give. So if there is another someone else want to explain, please.
Adam, sorry,
Yes.
are you saying that in Arabic it's the same word zakat used?
I don't know. I haven't checked, but the verse, Surah number 2, verse 215, it says they ask you about giving. Say the charity you shall give to your parents, the relatives, the orphans, the poor, and the traveling alien. So also it
Mhm.
doesn't say obligatory charities; it just says charity. And I think in Urdu, I
I
don't
think the
know.
charities order is also the same. First, you see if any of those, but then
Mhm.
there's then it's excess, right? As we know. But I am curious if in Arabic, like if somebody gets confused, if it is in Arabic same or zakat both ways, or
I can check. I
as
can.
we know that
No, no, it's not
obviously
the same.
no,
One is
eh?
charity.
Okay,
One is yeah. Zakat is when it says obligatory charity. That's when it says
yeah.
zakat. You know.
So
But
zakat is zakat, and
charity,
what
yeah,
is it
yeah, yeah,
called
yeah.
in
But
Arabic?
charity, but charity. It's when you just say charity, and you're not specifying if it's obligatory charity or not. Then it includes all. It includes just all charities, right?
Right. No, Salaman,
But
my question is
uh
what we all understand what zakat is, what other charity is, but the is it in Arabic zakat and a different word used for charity?
yeah, that's what I said. That
Just like
when it says zakat, that's when the word zakat is used in Arabic.
right, and
But
what does
other
it
for
say for
just for
charity?
charity, then it's other words like a few words. Like there's
In Arabic,
one like same as kharat, and then another one I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
sadaqah or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll
Hmm.
check.
I
Okay.
think I think the other word is infaq. I mean, I'm just
Yes.
checking 222, actually Surah Baqarah, actually verse 215, and it says, "Yes, alunaka maza yunfiqun, qul ma anfaqtum." So basically, it's talking about infaq, and it continues with فَلِوَالِدَيْنِ, so for the parents, فَالْأَقْرَبَيْنِ, so that like the close ones, the relatives, if I'm not mistaken, relatives, وَالْيَتَامَى, the orphans, وَالْمَسَاكِينَ, the poor, وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ, and the needy travelers. So basically, it is talking about anfaqtum, and it looks like it is the same order of the one which is used for zakat.
Yeah, his question was the word zakat is not used here, so how we distinguish between both of categories? I know Messenger of the Covenant explained this difference, but he has to explain to somebody who's not a submitter. I think
The
kind of
excess,
different.
where it clarified what is the other charity go from the excess. If you have more than zakat only, some people could just barely take 2.5% out of their earnings, but some who have more, then the many places God has described. But once again, we first need to look at that order, but then we can expand to God says striving the cause of God. That money can go for many, many reasons. And but once again, I think the order still needs to be in the mind, but it's more open. But it's very important to, it's like God leaves, it's a self assessment. How much your heart is willing to part from the excess? That is a very good question. Like, are we done with, like, once we did zakat, then or bare minimum, or we know that I have excess money available other than taking care of my family, other than my savings, my basic needs are being done. You could do so much. The more you have, more you can spend in the cause of God, and as in charity is one of the best way to redeem our sins. Anyway,
It's hard
Yeah,
to
I think,
give
and I think
charity.
the other thing is that the charity and the distribution system of charity. I mean, we have to understand that the charity, zakat, for example, was given to Abraham, right? So before the Quran was revealed. So it's not that we would practice it if it said the word verbatim zakat in the verse 2 to 15. It doesn't, and but we know that this is something that was given to Abraham, and that's how it is being practiced and was being practiced at the time the Quran was revealed. So that's mainly why we practice it that way. And with that, I mean, I do also, like, some people get really confused about what it means to follow Quran alone. So I think it's important to always reiterate that the reason why we practice these practices the way we practice them is not because everything is verbatim explained in the Quran about all of it, right? For example, it doesn't say anywhere in the Quran that the percentage of zakat is 2.5% either. So, like, many people use that as an objection and say, where does it say that we should give 2.5% and we should give 10% or whatever their own ideas are? But we know that the zakat, as we read earlier, that this was something that was given to Abraham. And so at the time of the revelation of Quran, I mean, these things were already being practiced, and as it was said, it's universally accepted. So that's why we follow it that way. For example, I remember this one person who's no longer with us was when he was debating the circumcision issue, and he was saying we will not follow circumcision because it's not in the Quran, and he was just using that just during the entire debate. So, but then this person posed this question to him. He said, okay, then he says, why do you pray? Uh, why do you pray without your shoes on? Where does it say in the Quran you should take off your shoes? And he was like, yeah, you're right. It doesn't say. So you don't have to take off your shoes. And he got stuck with that. And that stuck in his mind and, caused him to stray off. So, so I mean, that's the important distinction. We have to remember that when it comes to the practices of submission, I mean, these were given to Abraham. So it doesn't even say anywhere here that you have to do, 2 units for dawn prayer. So does that mean now you should go and do 4 units? Like, you can have other multiples of 19 if you want to just go by the multiples. For example, you can create your own multiple for number of units for dawn prayer, for example, and say, well, now this I can do 19 units because it's a multiple of 19, and this is my proof. But that's not how it works. And so it's very important for people to realize that. And when it says that, um, that any religious duties, that are not mentioned in the Quran. I mean, we know that the duties, that it's not the fact that the details have to be mentioned, but the duties have to be mentioned in the Quran. So, for example, giving zakat is mentioned in the Quran. So, in that sense, the Quran is complete. Doing our contact prayer is mentioned in the Quran. Doing our Hajj is mentioned in the Quran. Doing the fasting is mentioned in the Quran, not once, but like several times over and over. So that's how we know that the Quran is complete. And Quran tells us to do all these duties. And because these duties were established when the Quran was revealed, I mean, the specific details per se did not have to be included unless they were distorted at the time of the revelation of the Quran. And so, for example, 2.5% was not distorted, was never distorted. But the part that was distorted is, other like when it's given and other things. So those things, um, I mean, even I think when it's given, I don't know if that was distorted at the time, but it doesn't mean that it should only be mentioned when it's distorted. But the rule is that if it's distorted, it has to be mentioned at the time of revelation of Quran to correct it, right? Because nothing can just come in and go without God ordering it specifically and letting people know. For example, people who believe that circumcision was instituted at some point in the religion and then at some point it wasn't, and then they give the example of the Sabbath. It doesn't work because Sabbath is abrogated, and it's specifically mentioned in the Quran that it was abrogated for them. But it doesn't say anywhere about other things that are not part of submission. um, so yeah, that's just something I want to mention.
I guess this is the whole test. It would be a lot easier for God to just add the units and the 2.5%. How much ink would have that taken? Be a lot easier, but this is to give the disbelievers, to expose them, their inner, who they are sincere with. That as we grew up doing this regular salat is two for the first were 2 4 4 3 4. These were the same sequence, first, and then what is added is before the first there's they added sunnah, then after this first they added some sunnah and nafals, and all these excess things were added, but the sequence of first are the same. And so this thing was coming throughout from the Ibrahim, just like the verse number 54 says what prevented the acceptance of their spending in that they disbelieved in God and his messenger, and when they observed the contract prayer salat they observed them lazily. So like just like the footnote says, so it was in existence. So there's a reason God did not put the units and the zakat to expose the hypocrites and disbelievers. Basically, what are they going to trust more? Are they going to trust God more, who says in few places that my book is fully complete and detailed? Or are they going to believe on their imams and maulanas and muftis that no, the Quran is not complete? You need the hadith books to, without it, Quran is incomplete. That's what they're basically saying. And they're going against the very critical, important commandment of God, that God says that my book is complete. So you're going against God, where Surah 7, verse 51 very clearly explains, and those who do not listen to God, I mean, there very serious words are used about that what they do. Mashallah, praise God.
Okay. There any other comments? Any other questions? Any off-topic questions? No. Okay, so I guess we could conclude the study then. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Huda. And God willing, our next study is going to be on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time for the English study. And God willing, our teacher is going to be um, between Nubet and Ali. Which one? I think it's
Head or
Nubet's turn.
tails?
I think it's Nubet's turn. Yeah? What is
Is
it?
it? I don't know who did the last one. We can. Is Nudrat here?
Yeah, I'm here.
We can discuss. I mean,
Uh, last one was Ali's, I think.
okay.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
remember. I remember now.
Okay.
Okay.
So whose
Good
turn again?
memory, Solomon. At least you're keeping the
You
tab.
Oh yeah, I remember the
know.
text message.
Ali got it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So
So
inshallah. Mhm.
yeah, so I think yeah, we will write down. So next we read up until which verse was it?
I think till 68.
Mhm. Okay.
Yes. And we start from 969.
Okay. All right, thank you all. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Solomon,
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah.
just a quick question. If you're doing the Jummah prayer and if you happens to know the person who's leading the Salat did not do the wuzu properly, would that violate everybody's Salat, right?
What do you mean not properly? Like,
I'm hearing gossips that the person, some of the people they're doing this, they're not doing. But I have to investigate. I mean, I need to find out
uh-huh.
that they're just not the way it's supposed to be done. 4 steps.
Like they're not doing 4 steps?
Yeah, there's somebody who saw someone. I mean, I'm not so I'm not taking
Mm-hmm.
anything, but I will try to
Put
figure
security
out.
cameras
Yeah.
in your bathroom.
No, just straightforward. I asked them, but I'm gonna ask them that, how do you do the wudu? Just a topic.
Right, yeah,
But they
yeah.
just somebody was just caught doing just like how you do the wipe your head. So
Mm-hmm.
they just wet their hand and wipe their face and arms and head and feet, not running water.
Oh, they
That
didn't
is not
wash it, they
wudu,
just
right?
wiped it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, wipe it just like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
wipe your head.
Yeah, you should show them the video of the messenger. So
Right,
let's
right,
watch
right.
this video to see we're doing it correctly.
Yeah, but if somebody
Yeah.
does that and we know for fact, then we should not be standing behind that person, right?
Well, I mean, if you
For
should at least try to talk to them first and see
right.
if they refuse, then that's different, right?
That's okay. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, welcome, no worries.